Chapter 1. Why I had to write this. Let me be clear about one thing from the start. I didn't write this book to see my name in lights or to make a fortune. Honestly, I'm quite sure this path leads to neither. This is a labor of love, and labors of love rarely pay the bills or put you on a bestseller list. So why bother? What is the motive that drives me to put these words to paper? I've wrestled with this question, and the answer seems to boil down to 3 core reasons. First, because I believe the wisdom of the Buddha is the medicine our modern world desperately needs. Look around you. It doesn't matter where you are, east or west, our society is being battered by a tidal wave of materialism. We are lost in a maze of our own brilliant inventions, drowning in comforts that leave us feeling hollow. The very foundations of family and morality are cracking under the strain. On the world stage, nations engage in a terrifying nuclear arms race, perfecting new ways to annihilate one another. In our cities, you see the lost and the restless, the young rebels whose bravado is just a mask for their pain. You see corruption in the halls of power and violence on the streets. We are a people caught in a frantic scramble for fame and fortune, our minds buzzing with 1,000 anxieties. We don't know where we stand or even what we're doing anymore. On the surface, it's all roaring parties and dazzling distractions, but underneath it all, there's a profound and aching emptiness. And then, in the dead of night, when the noise finally fades, a moment of clarity might strike. In that quiet stillness, some of us begin to ask the terrifying questions. What is this all for? Why am I here? Is there any real value to this life I'm living? Others look at the crumbling social order, the bankruptcy of our ethics, and the slow decay of our humanity, and they feel a fire of anxiety in their chests. It feels as if humanity is at a crossroads. We either find a way to save ourselves, or we will march willingly toward our own destruction. So where do we find this path to salvation? There's an old saying, the one who tied the bell is the only one who can untie it. The problem isn't out there, it's in here. The solution is and always has been within us. Only by reawakening our own innate reason can we hope to piece our morals back together and rebuild a world worth living in. Only then can we see a glimmer of dawn for our future. And this is where I believe the teachings of a man who lived 2,500 years ago speak directly to our current crisis. The legacy of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, is not a dusty relic. It is a precise prescription for the sickness of the modern soul. The beauty of his path lies in its vastness and its simplicity, its profound equality. It's a medicine that works for everyone. The prescription is this: still your heart. Realize that happiness is not a thing to be found in the outside world. It is a garden you must cultivate within yourself. It is only through quiet contemplation, by wanting less and appreciating more, by learning to live for others, that you will find your own joy. This is the only way to extinguish the fires of suffering. Think about it. You must first calm the storm before the ocean can be still. And once the water is still, it becomes a perfect mirror, reflecting the mountains and the trees in perfect clarity. Only in that stillness can you finally see your own original face. Only then can you find your way back from the wilderness of being lost. It reminds me of a poem that captures this so well. The Green Mountain was never old. It was the snow that gave it a white head. The clear water was never troubled. It was the wind that wrinkled its face. We are born free and unburdened. So where does all this anxiety come from? Where does this suffering begin? It is the snow and the wind, the external things we allow to define us. But when the snow melts, it leaves no trace. Where is it now? When the wind stops, it leaves no shadow. Where did it go? We humans, in our strange and tragic way, insist on spinning cocoons for ourselves, trapping ourselves in worries of our own making. Is this not both heartbreaking and a little absurd? Second, because Buddhism can offer this generation of young people a direction and a purpose. Whether you call them punks or delinquents, rebels or outcasts, The young people acting out are all suffering from a wound in the soul. It's either an inflated ego or a crushing sense of worthlessness, or more often than not, a chaotic mix of both. When they tear down the street, the roar of a modified engine is a desperate cry for someone, anyone, to notice them. Their bravado is a shield for their confusion. When they escape into the chemical haze of a party, they are trying to numb the pain of a world that feels hostile and meaningless. And who can blame them? For any young person growing up today without a solid view of life, without a meaningful direction to strive for, how can they not become cynical? How can they not fall into despair? This is where the Buddhist path offers a radical invitation. First, just sit down. Be still. Turn your gaze inward and begin the work of examining who you are. Get to know yourself. Challenge yourself. Only by examining yourself can you begin to see your own arrogance, your own immaturity, your own ignorance. Only by truly knowing yourself can you move beyond the blind swings between ego and self-hatred. And only by tempering yourself, like steel in a fire, can you forge the willpower, the wisdom, and the courage to face any obstacle, to cut through the thorns in your path, and to build a life of integrity and meaning. The teachings of Buddhism are as vast and deep as the ocean, able to satisfy the most curious and hungry minds, and I'm including the brightest, most dedicated students in that. Its view of the cosmos is so grand it can't help but expand a young person's mind, inspiring them to explore the great mysteries of the universe. Its view of life is rooted in a profound compassion for all beings, encouraging a passion for service and a deep desire to heal the world. The ultimate goal is to help every single person find true happiness and freedom, true clarity and liberation. A world where we are no longer tormented by anxiety. A world where we are no one's servant and no one's sacrificial lamb, but the masters of our own destiny. Your future is in your hands, and isn't that the only place it can be truly safe? To live at the mercy of others is a constant source of pain. But to earn your own happiness through your own effort, that is what makes it precious. That is what reveals the sacred dignity of being human. Young people are natural mimics. They are malleable. Buddhism offers no throne to seize, no authority to worship, which might otherwise feed a young person's desire for power. There are no rigid hierarchies. The Buddha and the ordinary person are equals. You cannot separate them into master and servant, shepherd and flock. Think of the rolling river. The waves are magnificent, the current powerful, but you can't point to one spot and say, "Here is the wave and here is the water." The wave is the water. The water is the wave. In the same way, a Buddha is simply an awakened being, and every being is a future Buddha. What a powerful revelation this is for the young. It tells us that despite our differences in class, color, language, or belief, we are all fundamentally equal in our human dignity and in our Buddha nature, our potential to awaken. What is the difference between a flawless diamond stored in a velvet box and another diamond caked in mud? Its brilliance hidden. Isn't their intrinsic value exactly the same? You cannot separate the wave from the water, and you cannot separate the Buddha from all of us. We are one body. We are one family. This means we share in each other's joys and sorrows. No one can cut themselves off from the whole and find happiness in isolation. A wave cannot exist without the ocean. Therefore, the only path forward is one of service, empathy, and equality, using our own unique talents to contribute to the well-being of all. This is the path for our youth to strive for, a great road where helping yourself and helping others become the very same act. This is the goal worth fighting for, a world of shared humanity, built on the principle of caring for others first. This is the great insight of Buddhism. This is the teaching of the Buddha. And third, to offer a humble helping hand to friends who are curious to learn more. I have been working in education for only a few years, but in that short time, I've been struck by how many students are genuinely interested in Buddhist thought. After class or during lunch, a few of them will gather around me under the shade of a tree or in the campus garden, buzzing with earnest questions. In Buddhism, we speak of the act of giving. Of all the gifts one can offer, the greatest is the gift of the Dharma, the gift of sharing wisdom that can enlighten and guide others. Though my own knowledge is limited and my learning far from complete, I grew up in a Buddhist family, absorbing its principles by just being around them. And during my 4 years at university, I dedicated myself to studying them more deeply. The Dharma is like honey. It's sweet from the center all the way to the edge. Once you have a taste, you are captivated, and you can't bear to put it down. I am no missionary, but I do feel a responsibility to share what I know with those who haven't had the chance to learn. I want to help them understand these teachings, to awaken their own innate kindness and clarity. My hope is that it might inspire them to strive not only for their own personal growth, but also to dedicate themselves to the service of the wider human family. To me, this is a truly meaningful way to spend my time, and something I do with joy. As a teacher, my duty extends beyond the curriculum. I see my students as my own. Of course, I must take the vast and tangled world of knowledge, distill it to its essence, and present it to them with all the care and clarity I can muster. But the true purpose of education is not just to fill their heads with facts. It's about something far more important. It is to give them a moral compass and to help them untangle the great knots of life's questions. It is to be a wake-up call for the spirit, to nurture both wisdom and virtue. My goal is for my students to leave not only with a rich education, but with sterling character and a clear sense of purpose, ready to use what they've learned to make the world a better place. The problem is, my daily conversations with them, though fulfilling, are just bits and pieces. They lack a systematic framework. It's impossible to give them a complete picture of the landscape by just pointing out one tree at a time. It's a good start, but it's not enough. This book, then, is my humble attempt to remedy that. It is a simple and clear introduction to the ideas of Buddhism. My hope is that it will give my students, and you, the reader, a correct and lucid understanding of the path, and that you might use its lessons to cultivate your character and enrich your studies. My wish is for you to become a vibrant, engaged, and joyful student of life, and in the future, a citizen of integrity and honor. Chapter 2: What makes Buddhism different? If you place Buddhism alongside the other major religions of the world, you'll quickly notice that it stands apart in some very fundamental ways. To make things clear, I've broken these distinctions down into 10 key features. For now, let's explore the first 5. First, the Buddha was a human being, not a god. Take a look at any other major religion on the planet. Without exception, their founders are presented as supernatural beings, as gods. These gods can command the wind and the rain, turn stone into gold. They are the ultimate arbiters of human fortune, holding the power of life and death over all creation. In these systems, humanity's role is to kneel, to sing praises, and to attribute all of our own achievements to the glory of an all-powerful deity. Believe in this God, and you'll go to heaven. Oppose him, and you're condemned to hell with no chance to appeal. But the founder of Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama, was different. According to tradition, the first words he uttered after his birth translate to something like this: "In all the heavens and earth, I alone am the honored one." Now, before you recoil at the seeming arrogance of that statement, it's critical to understand who the I is referring to. It's not just Siddhartha himself. That I refers to every single human being. The true meaning of that phrase is a declaration of human potential. In this vast universe, we human beings stand tall. Each of us is the master of our own life. We chart our own course. We are not here to take orders from any person or any supernatural god. Siddhartha attributed his own awakening, his own profound achievement, entirely to human effort and human intelligence. He taught that our triumphs and our failures, our joys and our sorrows, are determined by our own actions, by whether we choose kindness or cruelty, by whether we choose to strive or to be complacent. No one can lift you up to heaven, and no one can push you down into hell. Singing praises and chanting hymns won't save you from suffering. The only way forward is to get your hands dirty with the real work of cultivating your mind and character. That is how you elevate your own spirit. That is how you find the deep and unshakable peace that comes from a life well lived. Siddhartha couldn't perform magic tricks like turning rocks into gold. His core principle was simple: you reap what you sow. He couldn't make an apple grow from a mango tree. If you want to harvest apples, you must first plant an apple seed. Siddhartha's role was not to perform miracles for you, but to show you the best way to cultivate your own orchard so that one day you could enjoy a rich harvest. But the tilling, the planting, and the watering, that work is up to you. It reminds me of a wonderful metaphor by the scholar Liang Qichao. He wrote that basking in the winter sun is one of life's great pleasures. But he said, as good as the sun feels, you have to go out and stand in it yourself. No one else can soak up the warmth for you. For 49 years, Siddhartha taught. He gave hundreds of talks, and every single one was essentially pointing the way down the same path, the path to becoming a Buddha yourself. This means creating your own most perfect and complete wisdom, your own most noble character. But this is a road you must walk on your own 2 feet, with your own grit, your own wisdom, and your own perseverance. As the Buddha himself said, you yourselves must do the work. The Buddhas only point the way. There are no shortcuts to awakening. It is a practice built one moment at a time, one breath at a time. As the old Zen poem says, without a winter that chills you to the bone, how could the plum blossom smell so sweet? Second, the Buddha was a true champion of equality. When I say the Buddha was a true champion of equality, I am not just spinning pretty words. To understand why, we have to look at the world he was born into. India during Siddhartha's time was a rigidly stratified society, divided into 4 main castes: the Brahmins, priests; the Kshatriyas, warriors and nobles; the Vaisyas, commoners; and the Sudras, servants and slaves. Siddhartha himself was a prince, born into the highest tier of the nobility. Yet, seeing the profound injustice of this system, he lit a revolutionary fire. He called for the abolition of the caste system and declared that all living beings were equal. Now, think about this for a moment. Nearly every revolution in history is a story of the oppressed rising up, demanding to be treated with the same dignity as the powerful. But have you ever heard of a story like Siddhartha? A man at the very pinnacle of society who voluntarily renounced his own privilege to stand shoulder to shoulder with the commoner and the slave. He did this not for personal gain, but because it was right. This selfless, unconditional act is why I call him a true champion of equality. Buddhism pushes this idea of equality even further with 2 concepts: unconditional loving kindness, maitri, and universal compassion, karuna. Let me briefly explain what these mean. Unconditional loving kindness. This is the idea that our capacity for love should not be limited to our inner circle. Of course, we should love our parents, our partners, and our friends. But Buddhism challenges us to extend that same loving care to people we don't have a personal connection with, the stranger on the bus, the person we pass on the street. It's the same spirit captured in the timeless wisdom. To care for all elders as we care for our own, to care for all children as we care for our own. It is the radical idea that we should not only love our family, but see all of humanity as our family. Universal compassion. This is the deep, visceral understanding that another's suffering is our own. It is the spirit that says, when another is hungry, I am hungry. When another is drowning, I am drowning. It's the recognition that we are all part of the same living body, interconnected in a web of shared existence. It's the feeling behind the sentiment, all people under heaven are brothers and sisters. The most profound expression of this is the vow of the Bodhisattva Ksitigarbha, who famously declared, as long as the hells are not empty, I will not become a Buddha. He refused to accept his own liberation, while even one being was still suffering. Finally, and perhaps most radically, Buddhism extends this concept of equality beyond the human race. It rejects the arrogant notion that all other animals were created simply for us to consume. The mournful cries of an animal facing death are a tragic thing to witness. Even the ancient philosopher Mencius was moved to say, "Having heard its cries, I cannot bear to eat its flesh." Buddhism goes a step further. It affirms that the animals we so casually hunt and slaughter all possess Buddha nature, the same potential to one day achieve enlightenment that we have. Yes, we may differ in form and intellect, but our fundamental right to exist and our intrinsic value are the same. Think of it this way: even a cruel or ignorant person still possesses a fundamental humanity. We must still treat them humanely and try to educate and reform them with compassion. Ancient wisdom from many cultures hints at this. Sayings like, "Heaven loves all living things," or "All of creation is born with me," echo this same idea of universal kinship. But no tradition has articulated it as thoroughly and profoundly as Buddhism. Third, the Buddha was not born all-knowing. Siddhartha Gautama was an ordinary man. His family name was Gautama, his given name Siddhartha. He was born in the 6th century BCE in northern India, in a place called Lumbini, which today lies just across the border in Nepal. At the age of 29, he walked away from a throne he was destined to inherit. He became a homeless wanderer, seeking a way to liberate himself and others from the suffering of life. After 6 years of intense spiritual struggle, at the age of 35, he sat down beneath a bodhi tree and experienced a profound awakening. He saw with perfect clarity the fundamental nature of the universe and of human life. It was only after this experience that people began to call him the Buddha, which simply means the awakened one. The reason I'm telling you his story is to make one thing perfectly clear. Siddhartha was a human being, just like us. If he could achieve enlightenment through his own practice, then every single one of us can follow his example. We can all walk the path he laid out and arrive at the same destination. Siddhartha was simply one of humanity, early awakeners. We are the ones who are awakening later. The difference between him and us is not one of status or inherent worth. The only difference is in the timing of our awakening. As the old scholar Han Yu said, some hear the truth earlier and some hear it later. Fourth, Buddhism believes no one is beyond saving. In many other religious frameworks, there is a point of no return. After repeated warnings and enticements from their God, after all the sermons and teachings, if a person still refuses to repent and declare themselves a lost sinner, a stray lamb, then a final judgment will come. They will be cast into an eternal hell, never to be redeemed. But there is a saying that goes, "A prodigal son's return is more precious than gold." Think of any parent. They will always leave the door open, always hope for their lost child to come home, even if that child has committed terrible crimes. No parent would ever wish for their child to suffer eternally in a fiery pit. Buddhism begins with the belief that our true nature is good. It teaches that the moment you drop the butcher's knife, you can become a Buddha. The real enemy is not sin. It is ignorance in Buddhism. This is called avidya. All harmful actions spring from this root of not knowing, of not seeing clearly. Therefore, the Buddha's work becomes a tireless, compassionate mission to guide and awaken all beings. The Buddha's love for all beings is described as being like a mother's love for her only child. Not only could he not bear for anyone to suffer in hell, he took the great vow. As long as the hells are not empty, I will not become a Buddha. Only when all beings have been liberated will I finally enter nirvana. What incredible kindness! What boundless compassion! This is true universal love. This is true mercy. Fifth, the Buddha is not a one and only God. Anyone can become a Buddha. As I mentioned before, the only real difference between a Buddha and an ordinary person is the timing of their awakening. Han Yu's line, "Some hear the truth earlier, and some hear it later," is the perfect way to understand this. Buddha is not a proper name. It is a title, just as teacher is a title for someone who educates and guides others. There isn't just one teacher in the world. Anyone with knowledge to share can be a teacher. In the same way, Buddha does not refer exclusively to Siddhartha Gautama. Anyone can become a Buddha. There can be Buddhas everywhere. This means there isn't just a Buddha on this planet. There can be Buddhas and living beings on countless other worlds throughout the cosmos. This is another point where Buddhism diverges sharply from other religions, which often insist on the existence of a single, exclusive God, while denouncing the gods of other faiths as false. Furthermore, in those other systems, no matter how hard a person works or how virtuous they become, they can never stand on equal footing with God. The relationship is eternally that of master and servant, because God is the creator and a human being is merely one of his creations. But in Buddhism, the ultimate goal is not to worship the creator, but to become an awakened one yourself. Sixth, Buddhism does not acknowledge a creator God. Many religions teach that the universe and everything in it was made by an all-powerful God. The primary evidence for this is often a creation story, like the book of Genesis in the Old Testament. But anyone with a little bit of philosophical curiosity can see that the concept of God is itself a human creation. We have fashioned gods in our own image, based on our own ideas. One of the main reasons we invented God was to answer the great looming question of cosmic origins, what philosophers call the first cause. But this just pushes the question back one step. Where did God come from? Proponents of these religions not only refuse to investigate that question, they declare it off limits, stating with absolute certainty, God is omnipotent. He simply is. But my dear friends, think about this for a moment. If God can be self-existent, in other words, if he doesn't need a creator to exist, then what's the point of the whole God created the universe argument in the first place? By that same logic, couldn't the universe just as easily be self-existent too? Let's try to put this in the language of a simple math problem. It might not be a perfect analogy, but it helps to clarify the issue. Let x equal the origin of the universe. Solve for x. The traditional religious answer doesn't bother with proofs or theorems. It just jumps straight to the solution. X equals God. But where did God come from? Well, now the equation looks like this. X equals God equals Y. Anyone with a basic understanding of math knows that Y is just another unknown variable. In other words, we haven't answered the question at all. We've just given our ignorance a name. Buddhism, on the other hand, rejects the creator-God hypothesis entirely. In fact, it rejects the very idea that the universe had a first beginning. What we call a beginning is simply the end of whatever came before it. In the endless chain of cause and effect, the cessation of one thing becomes the condition for the arising of the next. As Dr. C.C. Chang explains in his book, what is Buddhism? The concept of a beginning is a product of the limited human mind, which struggles to grasp the infinite web of causality. Think about it this way. You go to see the 7:00 p.m. showing of Gone with the Wind. The movie begins at 7 and ends at 10. But if you think more deeply, the beginning of your 7:00 p.m. show is just the end of the 4:00 p.m. show. And the end of your show is the beginning of the late-night screening, isn't it? The concept of a beginning only has meaning for a specific, isolated event. For the universe as a whole, this impossibly complex, interconnected, and continuous flow, the idea of a single starting point becomes meaningless. Time is a ceaseless river. Can you dip your hand in and pull out a single, static point called the present and declare, this is where it all began? Honestly, Buddhism isn't very interested in debating these kinds of abstract, metaphysical questions that have no real benefit for our lives. The universe is without beginning and without end. To exhaust yourself searching for the first cause is a fool's errand. It's a journey with no destination. Because even if you were to find what you thought was the first cause, you would inevitably discover another cause that came before it, and another before that, in an infinite regression. You will never find a fixed, ultimate starting point. Besides, life is short and uncertain. If you insist on going down this rabbit hole, you are likely to die long before you find an answer. There's a powerful parable in the Buddhist scriptures that illustrates this perfectly. A man is shot with a poisoned arrow. His friends and family rush him to a surgeon. But the man says, "Wait, I will not have this arrow removed until I know who shot me. Was he a nobleman, a priest, a merchant, or a servant? What is his name and his clan? Is he tall, short, or of medium height? Is his skin dark, brown, or golden? What village did he come from? I will not have this arrow removed until I know what kind of bow was used, what the bowstring was made of, what type of feathers were on the arrow, and what material the arrowhead was fashioned from." That man would die before he ever had his answers. So Buddhism doesn't waste time and ink endlessly pursuing the first cause. It's a pointless pursuit that does nothing to improve our lives. It has nothing to do with freeing ourselves from the suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death. It cannot lead to peace, liberation, or joy. Now I've strayed a bit. Let's return to the main point. Buddhism rejects a creator God and instead sees the world as a product of dependent origination. The idea that all things arise from a web of causes and conditions. Look at the mountain in front of us. It is an accumulation of earth and rock. A lake is simply a depression in the ground filled with water. The desk in this classroom is just wood, assembled by a carpenter. If you scatter the earth and rock, the mountain is gone. If you drain the water from the lake, you're left with a hollow piece of ground with no trace of a lake. If you take the desk apart piece by piece, where is the desk now? All of these things that have a physical form, which we can call form, are just temporary gatherings of conditions. They are not solid, unchanging realities. Therefore, we say they are empty, not in the sense of being nothing, but empty of a permanent, independent self. This is the simple meaning behind the famous Buddhist teaching. Form is emptiness. However, when Buddhism says emptiness, it does not mean a void or a blank nothingness. It is a dynamic emptiness, one that is full of wondrous potential. What does that mean? Let me give you an example. Here is a glass of water. If you heat it, it turns into steam, and you can no longer see the water. But this doesn't mean the water has vanished into nothing. When the steam cools, it will condense and become water again. Furthermore, anyone with a basic knowledge of chemistry knows that water is a compound of hydrogen and oxygen, H2O. In other words, water is just a name for a temporary combination of these elements. If you pass an electric current through it, the water will break apart into hydrogen and oxygen gas. By this logic, everything in the universe, without exception, is a temporary coming together of causes and conditions. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is unchanging. When conditions come together, things arise. When conditions fall apart, things cease. Where in this process is there room for a creator God? And where is the solid, unchanging creation? Seventh, Buddhist teachings are tailored to the individual. The Buddha's teachings were never one-size-fits-all. He always adapted his message to the person he was speaking to, taking into account their unique capacity, time, and place. For someone of great intellectual capacity, the Buddha might offer a direct teaching that could lead to an instantaneous awakening, a sudden insight into the true nature of the mind. But for someone of a more modest capacity, he would lay out a gradual path of practice, to be followed step by step. For someone obsessed with fame and fortune, he would teach the empty, transient nature of such things. But for someone mired in pessimism, who believed life was meaningless and hollow, he would teach that a human life is precious and rare, and that we can achieve happiness and joy through our own efforts, thereby inspiring them with courage and hope. The same principle applies to time and place. If someone in London asked the Buddha, "How do I get to Manchester?" the answer would be, "Go north." But if someone in Glasgow asked the same question, the answer would be, go south. The answer changes because the starting point is different. The Buddhist canon is vast, containing what is traditionally known as 84,000 Dharma gates, or methods of practice. Each of these methods was designed to suit a different type of person and to act as an antidote to a specific kind of suffering or confusion. If living beings didn't exist, there would be no need for the Dharma. The teachings are like medicine. If no one is sick with the fever of suffering, there is no need for a remedy. The fact that Buddhism has survived and thrived for over 2,500 years, adapting to countless different cultures and historical eras, is a testament to this incredible flexibility. This ability to teach according to the individual's needs is one of its most defining features. Eighth, Buddhism is a path of worldly engagement, not escape. While the ultimate goal of Buddhism might be described as transcendent or otherworldly, its practice is firmly rooted in this world. And by transcendent, we don't mean escaping the world, but transforming it, rebuilding it from the inside out. A famous verse from the scriptures says, "The Dharma is to be found in this world. Awakening is not separate from it. To seek enlightenment by leaving the world behind is like trying to find a rabbit with horns." This means the work of practice must happen here, in the midst of ordinary human life. Awakening happens here. Anyone who truly seeks the path cannot despise this world or run away from humanity to pursue some kind of solitary, holier-than-thou enlightenment. To become a fully awakened Buddha, one needs not only profound wisdom, but also a vast, compassionate vow to help liberate all beings. It is the union of these two wings, wisdom and compassion, that allows one to fly. You must weave them together, balancing and strengthening each other until they are perfected. So, Buddhism is about engaging in the world with a transcendent spirit. From the first step on the path to the final goal of Buddhahood, there is no leaving the world and no entering the world, because the entire journey takes place right here. Yes, the scriptures speak of pure lands, like the Western Paradise or the Eastern realm of Lapis Lazuli, and they encourage people to be reborn there. But anyone with a deeper understanding knows this is a skillful means, an expedient teaching to guide people. The ultimate goal of Buddhism is not for everyone to escape to some faraway paradise. The ultimate goal is to transform this very world into a pure land, to turn our hells into heavens. That is the real mission. Ninth, Buddhism is not exclusive. Most of the world's religions claim that their doctrine is the one and only truth, and they dismiss the teachings of other faiths as heresy or falsehood. Buddhism, however, sees other religions not in terms of good versus evil, but in terms of depth. It recognizes that any religion that has endured for centuries must offer some benefit to humanity. Otherwise, it would have been discarded by human wisdom and washed away by the tides of time long ago. The only real difference is that some religions may offer a temporary or limited happiness, while others offer a more lasting and universal well-being. Buddhism humbly places itself in the latter category. In its 2,500-year history, Buddhism has always coexisted peacefully with other faiths. There are no historical records of Buddhists initiating wars or bloody conflicts in the name of spreading their religion. Consider the words of the great Indian Emperor Ashoka, who ruled in the 3rd century BCE. Following the Buddha's teachings of tolerance and compassion, he had edicts carved into rock pillars throughout his kingdom. One of them, which still exists today, reads, "One should not honor only one's own religion and condemn the religions of others. One should honor other religions for various reasons. In so doing, one helps one's own religion to grow and renders service to the religions of others too. In acting otherwise, one digs the grave of one's own religion and also does harm to other religions. Therefore, concord is good. Let all listen and be willing to listen to the doctrines professed by others." This spirit of tolerance and genuine respect is one of the most precious legacies of Buddhist culture. From the Buddhist perspective, truth has no borders. It needs no brand name or religious trademark. It doesn't belong to any one religion or any one person in any one era. The truth the Buddha spoke of was not his personal invention. He was simply a discoverer of the truth, just as Isaac Newton discovered gravity. Gravity doesn't belong to Newton. Therefore, Buddhism considers any teaching that is reasonable and timelessly true to be, in essence, dharma. The Christian teaching, love your enemies, for example, is a beautiful and virtuous truth that Buddhism wholeheartedly embraces. It is another expression of unconditional loving-kindness and universal compassion. The Dharma is like the vast ocean. It has room for every river on earth to flow into it. As the scriptures say, all wholesome teachings are the Buddha's teaching. 10th, Buddhism is democratic and values freedom of thought. In many other religions, the word of the founder is an absolute command, an unquestionable truth. To disobey or even to doubt is to risk divine punishment. Their scriptures tell stories of humanity's ancestors being cast out of paradise for disobeying God's command, and of their descendants, all of us, being condemned to suffer for that ancient crime. They call this original sin. But I have only ever heard of diseases being hereditary, not sins. In ancient, barbaric times, a person's crime could lead to the execution of their entire clan. But in any modern, civilized nation, if a father commits a crime, he goes to prison. His family is not held responsible. Buddhism champions this very principle of individual responsibility. You are accountable for your own actions. If your father commits murder, you are not the one who will suffer the consequences in the afterlife, nor can you take on his punishment for him. I once had a very close friend who was a devout Christian. We used to have heated debates about the story of Adam and Eve. Our conversations often went something like this. Why were Adam and Eve kicked out of the Garden of Eden? I'd ask. Because Eve disobeyed God. She was tempted by the serpent and ate the forbidden fruit. She broke God's command, he'd say. Tell me, I'd continue, is God all-knowing and all-powerful? Yes, of course. He is omniscient and omnipotent. So, did this all-knowing God know beforehand that Eve would be tempted by the serpent? No, he'd reply, because God was testing them to see if they would obey. But if God didn't know what was going to happen, how can he be all-knowing? My friend would pause. Ah, wait, you're right, I misspoke. Of course God knew beforehand that Eve would give in to temptation. He's all-knowing. I'm sorry, I misspoke about God. He had cleverly sidestepped my first point, but he had walked right into another trap. Okay, I'd say. So if this all-knowing God knew for a fact that Eve couldn't resist the serpent, yet he still allowed the serpent to tempt her without intervening, and then punished them for it afterwards. Doesn't that sound like entrapment? Doesn't that sound like he was deliberately setting them up to fail? My friend would just stare, speechless. And so, Adam and Eve were cast out, and we are all supposedly suffering as a result. No matter how you look at it, the lesson is that God's word is law, and the consequences for disobedience are dire. But no one is allowed to question God himself, to ask if his commands are reasonable, if they are contradictory, or if they are simply despotic. Furthermore, religious texts are filled with stories of God becoming angry and punishing humanity with catastrophic floods and deadly plagues. You will never find a story in the Buddhist scriptures of the Buddha getting angry. You will certainly never find him inflicting such cruel and merciless punishments. In his 49 years of teaching, his disciples always saw their teacher as gentle, kind, compassionate, and serene. This was his demeanor toward good people and bad people alike. The Buddha never forced his disciples to accept his teachings. In fact, he encouraged them to doubt and to question everything. Even on his deathbed, at the age of 80, He repeatedly asked his disciples if they had any final questions or unresolved doubts. He famously said, "Great doubt leads to great awakening. Little doubt leads to little awakening. No doubt leads to no awakening." In his final address, he told his followers, "I have never thought that you disciples are mine. I am just one among you, a friend who has always been with you. I have never oppressed anyone, nor have I demanded that anyone obey me." What kindness, what moving humility is in those final words. This spirit of not only permitting but actively encouraging followers to question, doubt, and investigate the teachings of the founder for themselves is, I believe, unparalleled in the world. My friends, truth cannot be forced upon people. To compel someone to accept something they don't understand or don't believe in is not religion. It is politics. Truth reveals its true power and value only when it is examined and debated freely and openly. Among all the world's religions, only in Buddhism are the founder and the scriptures allowed to be questioned, discussed, and investigated. So, to all of you who have an inquisitive spirit, a desire for intellectual freedom, and a wise and independent mind, I welcome you to explore the path of the Buddha. Its doors are, and always will be, wide open. Chapter 3. Clearing up a few misunderstandings. Buddhism was born in India nearly 2,500 years ago, and in that time, it has spread to every corner of the globe. Over such a vast expanse of time and geography, it's inevitable that its original form would change, at least on the surface. Some of these changes were a natural evolution, adaptations that allowed the teachings to survive and flourish in new soil. When Buddhism came to China, for instance, it entered a profound dialogue with Taoism and Confucianism, giving birth to new and uniquely Chinese expressions of the Dharma, like the revolutionary school of Zen. But other changes were not so organic. They were the result of misunderstandings, of people simply repeating what they'd heard without looking into it for themselves. It's as if they willingly put on a pair of colored glasses and then insisted that the distorted view was reality. The purpose of this chapter is to gently help you, the reader, take off those glasses. My hope is that by doing so, you'll be able to see things more clearly. And if that clarity helps you to better understand Buddhism and clear up any misconceptions you might hold, whether you heard them from someone else or formed them yourself, then I will have accomplished what I set out to do. I've grouped these common misunderstandings into a few key points, which I'll address one by one. First, Buddhism is a path of intelligent faith, not blind belief. Before we dive in, we need to define our terms. What do we mean by intelligent faith versus blind belief? Simply put, blind belief is accepting something without careful thought or clear observation. It's taking something on faith just because someone told you to. Intelligent faith, on the other hand, is a conviction that comes after a process of careful thinking and clear-eyed investigation. Now, think about the people who are quick to label Buddhism as superstition. Often, they've only seen its most superficial aspects, or they've heard some second-hand rumors, and on that basis, they declare it a blind faith. But how much real thought have they put into it? To accept someone else's opinion without doing your own deep inquiry, without making your own clear observations, isn't that itself a form of blind belief? It's putting your faith in someone else's hearsay. As I explained in the last chapter, Siddhartha Gautama never demanded blind obedience from his followers. He actively encouraged them to ask questions. The Buddhist scriptures are fundamentally different from those of many other religions in this respect. They are meant to be questioned, investigated, and tested against your own experience. They are not presented as absolute, inerrant truths that are a sin to challenge. The Buddha himself once told his disciples that their doubt was perfectly legitimate. "It is proper for you to doubt, to be uncertain," he said. "Uncertainty has arisen in you about what is doubtful." He taught people not to be led astray by rumors or traditions. He warned them not to base their beliefs solely on scriptures, on logical inference, or on what seems plausible. He even went a step further, with a statement of astonishing intellectual honesty. He said that a person should not believe something simply because this is our teacher. Instead, he urged his followers to live by a teaching only when you yourselves know for certain that these things are good and wholesome. In Buddhism, doubt is not a sin. It is the doorway to wisdom. The saying, "Great doubt leads to great awakening. Little doubt leads to little awakening. No doubt leads to no awakening," perfectly captures this spirit of empirical, evidence-based inquiry. So when a great thinker like Liang Qichou says, "Buddhism is a path of intelligent faith, not blind belief," do you really think he was just talking nonsense? Second, Buddhism is pro-science, not anti-science. Sun Yat-sen, the founding father of modern China, once said, "Buddhism is the mother of philosophy, and the study of Buddhism can correct the imbalances of science." In other words, not only is Buddhism compatible with the scientific worldview, it can actually help to guide science, to remedy its blind spots and correct its course. Let me offer a few simple examples to show that science and Buddhism are not in conflict. At their core, they are both engaged in the same project, the pursuit of truth. A. The Buddhist view of the cosmos. For a long time, astronomers believed the universe was finite and had a fixed boundary. That idea has been completely overturned by modern discoveries. For centuries, the Ptolemaic system, which placed a static Earth at the center of the universe with the sun revolving around it, was upheld by the Church as unquestionable truth. When thinkers like Copernicus and Galileo challenged this view, they nearly paid for it with their lives. But religious authority could not hold back the tide of scientific evidence. Today, any schoolchild knows that Earth is just a tiny speck in a vast cosmos, and that it spins on its axis while revolving around the sun. Now, let's look at the cosmology described in ancient Buddhist texts. You'll find that it aligns remarkably well with the modern scientific picture, and in some ways, even surpasses it. Buddhism describes a small chiliocosm as a system of 1,000 solar systems. A medium chiliocosm is 1,000 of those, and a great chiliocosm is 1,000 of those. Each great chiliocosm, it is said, constitutes one Buddha field, a realm of influence for one Buddha. So how many solar systems are in a single Buddha field? That's 1,000x 1,000x 1,000, which equals 1 billion solar systems. This is roughly equivalent to what modern astronomers call a galaxy. And how many of these Buddha fields, or galaxies, are there in the universe? The Amitabha Sutra gives us a hint. It says that the Pure Land of Amitabha Buddha is located 10 trillion Buddha fields to the west of our world. That gives you just a glimpse of the staggering vastness of the cosmos as envisioned in Buddhism. This is why Siddhartha Gautama said, "The 10 directions of space are without limit. The worlds and lands within it are immeasurable." In modern terms, he was telling us that space is infinite, and that it contains an uncountable number of worlds. It was only after Galileo pointed his telescope to the sky during the Renaissance that astronomy began to progress, leading us to our modern understanding of the sheer scale of the universe. Only now do we appreciate that our Earth is a minor planet in a solar system that is itself just one of countless star systems in our galaxy, which is one of billions of galaxies. But 2,500 years ago, with no telescopes, Siddhartha was already describing a boundless space filled with an incalculable number of worlds. He used the word inconceivable to describe it, meaning a number so large it is not only beyond counting, but beyond human imagination. Only a mind of profound, prophetic wisdom could have painted such a vast, mysterious, and accurate picture of reality. B. 84,000 beings in a glass of water. The Buddha taught that the number of living beings in the universe is countless and unimaginable. He said that life exists not only on our Earth, but on innumerable other worlds as well. And besides the life we can see with our naked eyes, there is also life that is invisible to us. Pointing to a glass of water, he once said that it contained 84,000 living beings. In the sutras, the number 84,000 is often used as a poetic way of saying a great many. Today, with the advancement of science, no serious scientist would dare to rule out the possibility of life on other planets. We have yet to find it, but I believe it is only a matter of time before science once again confirms a Buddhist hypothesis. And as for the glass of water, put a single drop under a modern microscope. You will see a teeming world of microorganisms, numbering in the thousands or millions. How could Siddhartha have known this 2,500 years ago without a microscope? It is a fact that should fill us with awe and respect. See, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Classical physics was built on two fundamental laws: the conservation of mass and the conservation of energy. Physicists believed that matter and energy were two separate, indestructible things. They could not be converted into one another. In Buddhism, matter is called form. The teaching that form is emptiness would seem to be in direct conflict with classical physics. Furthermore, Buddhism teaches that everything in the universe is impermanent, that its essential nature is empty, and that nothing is indestructible. This, too, seemed to fly in the face of science. Then came Albert Einstein. His equation, E equals mc2, revealed that matter and energy are two sides of the same coin. It showed that a tiny amount of mass, matter, could be converted into a tremendous amount of energy. The successful detonation of the atomic bomb provided the final, terrifying proof that matter could, indeed, be annihilated and transformed into pure energy. If matter, form, can be turned into energy, emptiness, then isn't its essential nature empty of any solid, permanent reality? With that, the old laws of physics were overturned, and the Buddhist view of reality once again stood firm, tested and validated by the rigorous methods of science. Let me break it down simply. Form is emptiness. Matter, form, is made of atoms. Atoms are made of a nucleus and electrons. The nucleus, in turn, is made of protons and neutrons, and these particles can be smashed apart, releasing their bound energy, emptiness. The old idea that the atom was the indivisible, fundamental building block of reality was proven wrong. Emptiness is form, energy, emptiness, can be converted back into matter, form. This is a cornerstone of modern particle physics, accepted by the entire scientific community. Finally, consider another implication of Einstein's theory of relativity. Time is not absolute. It changes relative to speed. If you were to take a trip on a rocket traveling at the speed of light, you could leave Earth after breakfast, have lunch on a distant planet, and plan to be back home for dinner. But when you returned, you would find that centuries had passed on Earth. All your friends and family would be long gone. No scientist today would deny the theoretical possibility of this. Now, consider a passage in the Lotus Sutra, where the Buddha says to his assembly that while they feel they have only been listening to his talk for a short while, countless eons have passed in the outside world. Einstein's theory of time dilation was described in a Buddhist text 2,500 years ago. This is why Sun Yat-sen said that studying Buddhism can correct the imbalances of science. It is because, in so many ways, Buddhist thought has been running ahead of science all along. Third, Buddhism is about compassion, not killing. Every so often, you'll see a newspaper story that makes you want to just shake your head and sigh. It will be something like, to celebrate a bodhisattva's birthday, devout followers sacrificed over 100 pigs to show their sincerity. Or you might walk down the street and see a statue of Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment of compassion, with a giant roasted pig placed before it as an offering, its mouth gaping open in a silent scream. The irony is so thick, you have to laugh to keep from crying. Let's be perfectly clear. The most fundamental precept in Buddhism is not to kill. The path is founded on the principle of universal equality. We are taught to save and protect all living beings, especially the small and the weak. How could a path based on this possibly condone ritual slaughter? Buddhism also teaches the principle of rebirth. It holds that any being who has not yet achieved full awakening is bound to the cycle of life and death, an endless journey through the ocean of suffering. This means that beyond this single life, we have lived countless past lives. We have had innumerable mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, friends and teachers. Because we are not yet awakened, we don't have the wisdom to see these connections, so we live in ignorance of them. But if we kill an animal at random, we may be killing a being who, in a past life, was our own parent or our dearest friend. This is one of the core reasons why Buddhism advocates for non-harming, and for many, a vegetarian diet. Of course, some of you will immediately ask, but how do you know that? How can you possibly prove it? To answer that, let me first offer a short dialogue. Person A, tell me, does the wind exist? Person B, of course it does. Person A, okay, then please show it to me. What color is it? What shape is it? Person B, that's impossible. Person A, so, if you can't show it to me, does that mean it doesn't exist? Person B, no, just because I can't catch the wind in my hands or point to it doesn't mean it's not real. It exists, I just can't show it to you in that way. There are countless realities in this universe that we cannot prove with direct, physical evidence, but that doesn't negate their existence. Furthermore, the number of cosmic phenomena that science, for all its achievements, still cannot explain is immense. Can we really expect the average person to easily grasp the full, intricate, and complex reality of life and the universe? Siddhartha Gautama understood this profoundly. That is why he told his disciples, I am one who speaks the truth, who speaks what is real, who does not speak deceptively. He wanted his followers to investigate and understand everything they possibly could. For the rest, for the things that lie beyond the limits of our current understanding or the descriptive power of language, he asked for a provisional trust. Some truths can only be known through direct experience. As the Zen saying goes, it's like drinking water. Only the person drinking knows if it's cool or warm. The ability to clearly perceive past lives is a specific spiritual attainment, siddhi, one that can only be developed through dedicated practice. Can you describe the vibrant reds and greens of a spring day to a person born blind? Can you explain to a person with severe cognitive disabilities that a certain man is his father's brother's son, his cousin? So, since the Buddhist path is one of non-harming and compassion, please remember this. Any practice that involves the regular slaughter of animals as offerings, chickens, ducks, or pigs, is, by definition, not Buddhist. Fourth, Buddhism is actively optimistic, not pessimistic. One of the most common criticisms leveled against Buddhism is that it's pessimistic and negative. Why do people have this misconception? I think it's because Buddhism starts by honestly confronting the reality of suffering, of birth, old age, sickness, and death. It teaches that life is impermanent, that everything in the world is a temporary convergence of causes and conditions, constantly in flux. It points out that things like fame, wealth, and status are fleeting and dreamlike, and so it advises us not to become overly attached to them, not to cling to them as if they will last forever. Buddhism also teaches that many desires lead to much suffering. An excess of craving is often the root of our anxiety and dissatisfaction. Therefore, it encourages us to cultivate contentment and to want less. It asks us to honestly assess our own capacities and align our desires accordingly. If we lack the means to achieve something but spend all day fantasizing about it, are we not just torturing ourselves? But please remember, Buddhism does not teach the extinction of desire. It teaches contentment with little. The Buddha was firmly against extreme asceticism that harms the body. After he left his palace at age 29, He spent years practicing the harshest austerities of his day, eating, it is said, only a single grain of rice and a single sesame seed each day. He became emaciated, a walking skeleton, but this self-torture did not lead to the awakening he sought. He finally realized that abusing the body was not the path to liberation. While the body is impermanent and will one day die, it is also the precious vehicle for practice. If the body is not healthy, how can you think clearly? How can you meditate? Contentment with little is a middle way. There is a beautiful story in the scriptures that illustrates this. The Buddha asked a monk, who had been a skilled musician before his ordination, a series of questions. "Tell me," the Buddha said, "if the string of your lute is too loose, can it produce a sound?" "No, Lord." "And what if the string is too tight?" "Then the string will break." "But what if the string is tuned just right, not too loose and not too tight?" "Then, Lord, it can produce all manner of beautiful music." Buddhism is not the hedonism of let's eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Nor is it the self-mortification of intentionally starving or freezing oneself. The Buddhist principle of contentment with little is the middle way to happiness, a path of balance, not extremes. Okay, I've gotten a bit sidetracked. Let's return to this idea of pessimism. When Buddhism asks us to contemplate the impermanence of life, it's not to make us depressed. It's a wake-up call. It's to shake us out of our complacency and remind us not to waste our precious youth. Only by recognizing how fleeting our time is will we be inspired to cherish it and to use it to do something meaningful, something that benefits both ourselves and the world. Buddhism also teaches that the four great elements are empty. These four elements, earth, solidity, water, fluidity, fire, heat, and wind, motion, are seen as the fundamental constituents of our bodies and the physical world. Your flesh and bones are the earth element. Your blood and bodily fluids are the water element. Your body heat is the fire element. Your breath and movement are the wind element. Our bodies are just a temporary combination of these four. One day they will separate and our bodies will decay. There is no solid, permanent entity there. That is why it is said, the four great elements are empty. And because of this, Buddhism teaches no self, Anatman. Now this is where some readers get confused. What do you mean, no self? You might ask. I'm right here. But this I that you feel is so solid is just this temporary gathering of earth, water, fire, and wind. The cells in your body are dying and being replaced every second of every day. You are in a constant state of flux. So which one is the real you? The you of a moment ago or the you of this moment? It's like trying to pinpoint now in a flowing waterfall. Perhaps you'll say, the I is the one who thinks. But your thoughts are also in constant motion, rising and falling like waves on the sea. One thought appears, and before it even fades, the next one is already arising. In this ceaseless stream of consciousness, which thought is the real you? The one you just had, the one you're having now. This is why your opinions and ideas are always changing. What you thought was right yesterday, you might see as wrong today. Therefore, if you look for a permanent, unchanging self in either your body or your thoughts, you won't find one. This is the meaning of no self. But the teaching of no self is not a call for nihilism or despair. It's not an excuse to think, well, if there's no me, then it doesn't matter what I do. Or if I'm not real, what's the point of trying? To think that way is to completely miss the point. The teaching of no self is meant to help us see that the conventional I that we cling to so desperately is just a temporary phenomenon. One day, the elements that compose it will disperse, and it will decay and die. Realizing this helps us to loosen our obsessive grip on fame and fortune. It helps us to stop haggling over every little thing and to treat others with more tolerance, generosity, and patience. It is precisely from the wisdom of no self that true altruism is born. Only when you let go of the small, separate self can you realize the great self that is interconnected with all life. Only then can you find the courage to walk through fire for a cause greater than your own personal survival. A person who truly understands no self will not harm others for their own gain. They will be free to dedicate their lives, to sacrifice everything, for the good of their country and their fellow human beings. So Buddhism uses the realization of no self and seeing through things as a means to achieve the end of serving society and benefiting all people. When you live this way, you are no longer bound by the shackles of fame and fortune. You find true freedom and ease. The gnawing anxiety of wanting and fearing loss simply dissolves. Fifth, Buddhism is not an escape from reality. Some people see monks and nuns living quiet lives of meditation in mountain monasteries and conclude that Buddhism is a retreat from the world, a way of avoiding social responsibility. This, too, is a superficial judgment. Buddhism is a path of wisdom and compassion cultivated together. Having a compassionate heart that wants to save the world is not enough if you lack the wisdom and skill to actually do it. What good is the desire to save a drowning person if you don't know how to swim? Therefore, when a true practitioner of the Mahayana path, the great vehicle that aims to carry all beings to enlightenment, goes into retreat, it is not an escape. It is a period of intensive training and preparation for the future work of spreading the Dharma and helping others. It's no different from a scientist working in isolation in a laboratory, preparing for a breakthrough that will benefit all of humanity. And this isn't just for monastics. Lay practitioners are also taught to cultivate both merit and wisdom, punya and prajna. We must not only work for our own well-being, but also train ourselves to develop the wisdom needed to serve others. To illustrate that Buddhism is anything but an escape, I only need to tell one story, that of Xuanzang, the great 7th century monk who journeyed to India and became the real-life protagonist of the classic novel Journey to the West. Xuanzang was offered the prestigious position of abbot at a major monastery in the capital, but he refused. He was troubled by the scarcity of Buddhist texts in China and the poor quality of the translations, which led to confusion and doubt. He took a great vow to risk his life to travel west, retrieve the authentic teachings, and bring them back to enlighten his homeland. He wanted not only to translate the sutras, but to resolve the pressing philosophical debates of his time and make a sacred and lasting contribution to his culture. He set off in 629 CE, crossing fiery deserts and treacherous mountain ranges, surviving countless near-death experiences to reach the homeland of the Buddha. There, he wept at the sight of the Buddha's enlightenment, seeing the decline of the Dharma in its native land, and rededicated himself to mastering it. He became a legendary scholar, and at a famous debate, his brilliant exposition of Buddhist philosophy silenced all his opponents. Kings vied for the honor of having him teach in their lands, nearly going to war over him. At the very peak of his fame and success, Xuanzang decided it was time to go home. The words he spoke to his elderly teacher, even now, nearly 1,400 years later, are enough to move one to tears. "Master," he said, "the purpose of my quest was not for my own personal glory or knowledge. If it were only for that, I would not have risked my life to come here. Now that I have had the privilege of learning from you, I must return to my country to share these teachings and to help my countrymen who are suffering. If I stay here any longer, I will have failed them." What a vision! What magnanimity! This is the spirit of a true hero. This is the spirit of a great human being. This is the spirit we should all aspire to. As one historical commentary on Xuanzang puts it, this great monk spent half his life seeking the scriptures and the other half translating them. He lived the colorful life of an adventurer, possessed the sacrificial spirit of a martyr, and was fired by the world-saving passion of a true philosopher. He gave his entire life for Buddhism, for Chinese culture, and for all of humanity. The pen has fallen from his hand, and his great heart has stopped beating, but the footprints he left in the desert remain forever in human memory, and the 1,000 volumes he translated remain forever in the treasury of Chinese culture. Who can say that Buddhism is an escape from reality? Who can say it is negative, pessimistic, or world-denying? Sixth, Buddhism is not just empty talk. I sometimes hear people sigh and say, "It's not that I don't want to study Buddhism, and it's not that the teachings aren't good. It's just, they're so complicated and profound." The implication is that there are too many scriptures, and they are too difficult to understand. A friend once asked me, "Why can't Buddhism be more like Christianity and just have one simple, essential book like the Bible?" Honestly, this question is a bit naive. I responded by asking him, is the universe a simple place or a complex one? Is human life simple or complex? I explained, the Dharma is an exploration of the true nature of reality. Because reality is complex, it can't be explained in a few simple words. And because the truths of life are not always easy to grasp, the teachings that explain them can seem profound and difficult. Furthermore, the teachings are for everyone, and people are endlessly diverse. Our capacities for understanding differ. Some are brilliant, some are simple. Therefore, the teaching cannot be a rigid, one-size-fits-all dogma. The same essential truth must be explained from many different angles to meet people where they are. Most importantly, Buddhism is not a religion of empty theorizing. It is a path of practical application, where the teachings can be personally experienced and verified. Take, for example, the practice of meditation. There are many methods, focusing on an object, visualization, breath work, chanting, movement, or simply observing the nature of the mind. Whichever method you use, the goal is the same: to awaken the mind to see its true nature and to transform confusion into wisdom. Consider the story of Huineng, the sixth patriarch of Zen in China. He was an illiterate layman who worked chopping wood. Yet when he saw a verse written by the head monk of the monastery, "The body is a bodhi tree, the mind a standing mirror bright. At all times, diligently wipe it, and let no dust alight," knew instantly that the author had not yet seen the truth. He said the monk had reached the gate, but had not yet entered the hall. Huineng then dictated his own verse, which has echoed through the centuries. Bodhi is not a tree, nor is the bright mirror a stand. Fundamentally, not one thing exists, so where can the dust land? The fifth patriarch recognized his profound insight and secretly passed the robe and bowl, the symbols of the Zen lineage, to this unlettered woodcutter. If you read the Platform Sutra of the sixth patriarch, you will be struck by the brilliance and clarity of his wisdom. The truths he speaks are identical to those spoken by the Buddha himself. There is a famous story about Huineng. One day, he saw two monks arguing about a banner flapping in the wind outside the temple. "The wind is moving," said the first monk. "No, the banner is moving," said the second. "How can you say the wind is moving?" "Without the wind, how could the banner move?" the first retorted. Huineng overheard them and said, "It is not the wind that is moving, nor is it the banner that is moving. It is your own minds that are moving." There are countless other examples of masters who began with little or no formal education, but who, through the deep practice of meditation, experienced a sudden, profound awakening. Afterwards, they could expound the deepest truths of the Dharma, and worldly skills like poetry, art, and calligraphy would flow from them effortlessly. The point is that this is a path of direct experience. This is true not only for the sudden path of Zen, but also for the devotional path of the Pure Land School, which focuses on chanting the name of Amitabha Buddha. Practitioners on all paths have achieved verifiable results. In recent history, there are masters whose bodies, after death, did not decay, a sign of great spiritual attainment. There are others whose cremated remains yielded thousands of sarira, small, pearl-like relics, crystalline and multicolored, that are found among the ashes of highly realized practitioners. These are not just stories. They are the tangible evidence that the practice bears fruit. This is not just empty talk. It is a living path of transformation. 7th, Buddhism rejects fatalism. What do we mean by fatalism? In short, it's the belief that your life, your successes and failures, your joys and sorrows is all predetermined. It's already written in the stars, and there's nothing you can do to change it. A fatalist is someone who simply resigns themselves to fate. They believe everything is destined. This is a very common way of thinking, and it's a cornerstone of many belief systems. People who think this way believe that if you are fated not to get into a top university, then no amount of studying will make a difference. If you are fated to be rich, then no amount of extravagant spending can ever make you poor. Buddhism, however, completely rejects this way of thinking. It affirms that for every measure of effort, there is a measure of reward. As the old Buddhist saying goes, Gong Bu Tang Huan, no effort is ever wasted. Buddhism teaches that your future is an unknown, a vast landscape of possibilities. What it becomes is determined by your actions in the present. Your future is in your own hands. There is no such thing as being destined to fail. If you are willing to work hard, the doors to opportunity will open for you. Likewise, no one is destined to be wealthy forever. If you are reckless and wasteful, if you don't manage your resources wisely, you will eventually end up with nothing. Buddhism is not a path for fatalists. This leads us to a deeper discussion of the Buddhist understanding of cause and effect, often known as karma. While we often hear the simple version, you reap what you sow, the Buddhist explanation is more nuanced. It's more accurately described as cause, condition, and effect. This means that between the cause, the seed, and the effect, the fruit, Buddhism places enormous importance on conditions. What are conditions and what do they do? Let's say you plant a melon seed, the cause. But if there is no sunlight, no water, no fertilizer, and no one to tend the soil, the conditions, that seed will never sprout, grow, and bear fruit. Therefore, even if a person planted good seeds in a past life, if in this life they don't continue to cultivate goodness, if they don't create supportive conditions for those seeds to grow, they may not see a bountiful harvest. However, the good seeds they planted are not lost. They simply remain dormant. The philosopher Confucius once remarked, "There are shoots that sprout but never flower, and there are flowers that bloom but never bear fruit." The growth of a plant depends entirely on the care it receives after it sprouts. By the same token, if a person has done harmful things in the past, but in this life, they sincerely repent and dedicate themselves to doing good, they may be able to change their trajectory and avert the negative consequences. Now, I know this might raise a question for you. You might say, "You said they may be able to avert the consequences. Doesn't that imply they also may not?" Let me use an analogy to explain. If someone ingests poison and is rushed to the hospital, there are two possible outcomes. They recover or they die. Why is it that even after taking the poison, a negative cause, like a harmful act, and receiving medical treatment, a positive condition, like doing good, they might still die? The answer isn't simple. It depends on at least three factors. The severity of the poisoning. How harmful was the original act? What kind of harm was it? How quickly they got to the hospital. How soon did they recognize their mistake and begin to make amends? The effectiveness of the treatment. What kind of good deeds are they doing? How do those actions relate to the original harm? All three of these variables can influence the final outcome. But please, do not get caught up in the details of my analogy. It is an imperfect tool, meant only to help you grasp the spirit of how cause and effect work. It is a similarity, not an equality. The Buddhist understanding of karma encompasses the entirety of our boundless universe, across infinite space and time. Its intricate complexity is beyond the comprehension of ordinary minds. Only a fully awakened being, one with true wisdom prajna, can perceive its workings clearly. It's like looking inside a modern supercomputer. you'll see a bewildering web of circuits and pathways. Who but a specialized engineer could possibly understand how it all works? In the same way, my simple analogy cannot possibly capture the infinite causal network of reality. It's like trying to explain a massive, thundering waterfall by scooping out a single cup of water. So, how does Buddhism advise us to approach a situation where, despite our best efforts to do good now, we still face the consequences of past negative actions? This is what Buddhism teaches. Continue to do good, even more actively. Those good actions are planting new seeds that will, without fail, bear fruit in the future. Do not lose heart. Courageously accept the unchangeable consequences. For karma that is already ripened and cannot be changed, niyata karma, Buddhism counsels us to endure it with patience and dignity. A person of integrity takes responsibility for their actions. If you have broken the law, you must accept the punishment. To complain, blame others, or try to escape is a sign of weakness and a refusal to be accountable. This is often mistaken for fatalism, but it is the exact opposite. It is active acceptance, not passive resignation. Learn from the painful lesson. Use this experience as a powerful reminder to be more mindful and careful in the future. Knowing that the law of cause and effect is unerring, we should live by the principle. Do not think a good deed is too small to do, and do not think a bad deed is too small to get away with. Therefore, the Buddhist view of life is fundamentally proactive and forward-looking. We must have the courage to acknowledge our past mistakes and the fortitude to endure their consequences, using the experience to temper our character. At the same time, we must strive with all our might to create a better future. There is no room for pessimism, despair, or self-pity. Finally, this brings us to that perplexing question. Why do good people suffer, while bad people seem to live long, prosperous, and happy lives? There is an old saying that captures the Buddhist answer perfectly. Good deeds bring good returns, and evil deeds bring evil returns. If you see no return, it's only because the time has not yet come. The key is that last part. The time has not yet come. When a good person suffers, or a bad person thrives, it is not because the law of karma has failed. It simply means that the good person is now experiencing the ripened fruit of negative seeds planted in the past, while their present good deeds will bear fruit in the future. Likewise, the bad person is currently enjoying the fruit of past good seeds, while their present harmful actions have yet to ripen. The effects of our actions can manifest at different times. Some ripen in this very life, like planting a tomato seed and harvesting the fruit a month later. Others may take many lifetimes to mature, like planting an oak tree that will only provide shade for future generations. As another ancient verse says, good and evil will have their reward in the end. The way of heaven cycles back. Don't believe it, just look up. Who has heaven ever spared? My friends, remember the saying, the nets of justice are cast wide, but nothing slips through. Do not commit even the smallest harmful act. A single cancer cell, tiny and insignificant at first, can grow to destroy your precious life and cause you unimaginable pain. Eighth, Buddhism does not worship idols. One of the most frequent and forceful attacks leveled against Buddhism by other religions is the charge of idol worship. So, does Buddhism worship idols? My answer is an unequivocal no. In fact, I would argue that there is no religion in the world that is less of an idol-worshipping tradition than Buddhism. Before you doubt me, please hear my explanation. As I have stressed repeatedly in this book, Buddhism teaches that the four great elements are empty, and that form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Everything in the universe is a temporary convergence of causes and conditions. Nothing has a fixed, unchanging self. Ice is just water that has been chilled. Water is just hydrogen and oxygen combined. Those elements are just collections of subatomic particles. Where is the permanent, unchanging thing? Therefore, a core principle of Buddhist philosophy is to smash attachments to form. What does this mean? It means breaking down the mistaken human belief that things born of causes and conditions are solid, real, and permanent. So is a statue, an idol, one of the forms that Buddhism seeks to deconstruct? Absolutely. A statue is just wood, stone, or clay, perhaps decorated with gold leaf. It too is a temporary combination of causes and conditions. Its fundamental nature is empty. Since the statue is a product of dependent origination, Buddhism cannot possibly recognize it as a permanent, sacred entity in itself. Therefore, we must also smash our attachment to the form of the statue. At this point, some of you are surely impatient to ask, if you're so busy deconstructing statues, why are your temples filled with them? To answer this requires balancing the profound philosophy of Buddhism with its compassionate use of skillful means to help people. From a philosophical viewpoint, a Buddha statue is made of materials, causes, and shaped by an artist conditions. If you take it apart, the statue is gone. It has no permanent self, so its nature is empty. Furthermore, if the artist had decided to sculpt a figure of the Virgin Mary, it would be Mary. If they had sculpted Jesus, it would be Jesus. The name we give it and the shape it takes are arbitrary or provisional. You can call a statue on a lotus throne Amitabha Buddha, or Siddhartha Gautama, or any other Buddha. What difference does it make? It's like a cup. If you drink tea from it, it's a teacup. If you drink wine, it's a wine glass. This way of seeing things as both empty of inherent existence and provisionally appearing is central to Buddhist thought. But after realizing this, we are then asked to see the statue through the lens of the middle way, to recognize its conventional value and purpose. And what is that? The statue serves as a powerful reminder. It inspires us to see virtue and wish to emulate it. It evokes a feeling of reverence and a desire to follow the path of the one it represents. From a practical viewpoint, if everyone in the world had the wisdom to understand that a statue is merely a symbol meant to inspire us, then we wouldn't need them. The Buddha would be in our hearts. We would see him in the gentle breeze and the bright moon, in the light on the mountains and the reflection in the water. Every rock, every blade of grass, every cloud, every sunset, what couldn't be seen as a representation of the Buddha? But not everyone is a great sage. Many people cannot connect with such an abstract, profound idea. If they can't see it and touch it, they can't believe in it. They cannot generate that feeling of reverence and aspiration. Try telling a devout elderly woman to kneel and pray to a random rock as if it were the Buddha. She would never do it. How few of us can truly grasp the deep wisdom that Bodhi is not a tree, nor is the bright mirror a stand. So, my intelligent friends, you can now see the answer. In its great compassion, Buddhism cannot only offer profound philosophy for the wise. For those of a simpler capacity, it must provide a bridge, using conventional, worldly tools to guide them. The meaning of revering a Buddha statue lies in the truth that the statue symbolizes, not in the object itself. Think about it. Does any country in the world not use a national flag to inspire patriotism? Do we not hang portraits of great leaders and thinkers to inspire emulation and respect? If someone were to say that saluting a flag or honoring a portrait of a great humanitarian is idol worship, we would rightly see that person as foolish and uncomprehending. They would be missing the entire point. Chapter 5. The Benefits of a Buddhist Path. The importance of having a spiritual or philosophical framework for one's life is self-evident. It is a vital part of our inner world, a source of profound strength, inspiration, and resilience. A sound spiritual path can bring stability to society and clarity to the human heart. It gives us faith and hope for the future, empowering us to live a more rational, noble, and fulfilling life. Generally speaking, a good path offers comfort to those in despair and a moral compass to those who might otherwise do harm. For those who are already kind and good, it provides encouragement to go even further. In this chapter, I want to discuss the specific benefits of walking a Buddhist path. But first, I must be clear. This does not mean that other religions offer no benefits. As Dr. C.C. Chang wrote in his book, What is Buddhism? The Dharma never denigrates other religions. It understands that people have different capacities, and so the methods of teaching cannot be rigid. He goes on to say, every religion and philosophy has its own value and function. Each one can, in a specific time and place, offer guidance and benefit to a certain type of person. However, we must also acknowledge that because founders differ in their wisdom and vision, because their teachings vary in depth, and because their methods and spirit are not the same, the benefits offered by different paths are not identical. A primary school and a university are both schools. Both can teach students about how to live and work in the world. But can we really say that what one learns and gains from each is the same? What follows are the benefits I believe the Buddhist path offers. While some may be found in other traditions, I believe the Buddhist approach offers a unique depth and completeness. First, Buddhism gives you a correct and empowering view of life. Buddhism analyzes the great questions of life and the universe in meticulous detail, not for academic sport, but to help us arrive at a clear-eyed and accurate understanding of our own existence. Most people tend to fall into one of two camps regarding their view of life: pessimism or a kind of frantic optimism. The pessimist, this person sees life as short and empty. For them, living is just a waiting game for death. As a result, they are often sad, anxious, and lacking in energy. The optimist, this person isn't truly happy either. Their life lacks a deeper purpose, so they adopt a seize-the-day mentality. They use frantic parties, sensory indulgence, and constant noise to numb their minds and hearts. They don't know what the meaning of life is, and they don't care to find out. The Buddhist view of life, strictly speaking, is neither pessimistic nor optimistic. We could call it realistic, or perhaps a middle-way view. What does this mean? It means we neither weep and wail about the sorrows of life, nor do we mindlessly squander our precious time. A Buddhist view uses the eye of wisdom to cut through all the doubt, fear, and confusion that clouds our vision. It allows us to see life as it truly is, and from that clarity, to grasp our own direction. Some people suspect that Buddhism is pessimistic because it talks about suffering, emptiness, and no self. It points out that life is full of dissatisfaction, and that the world we see is just a temporary collection of causes and conditions, with nothing solid or permanent to be found. But in truth, Buddhism is not pessimistic. It simply refuses to ignore the diagnosis for fear of the disease. Look at your own life. Is it not filled with challenges and sorrows? Look at the world. Can you point to a single thing that is truly permanent and unchanging? Even the great Confucius, watching a river flow, sighed, "It passes on like this, never ceasing day or night." Buddhism is not an irresponsible path. It first asks us to courageously acknowledge the reality of suffering. Then, it shows us that this suffering arises from our own ignorance and craving, which means that we ourselves have the power to overcome it. Finally, it points the way to true happiness, teaching us to temper our desires and to live for the well-being of others. Buddhism is founded on a deep conviction. True happiness can never be built on the suffering of others. Only when all beings are happy and free can any individual find their own genuine, lasting joy. Buddhism teaches that fame, status, and wealth are like clouds passing in the sky. You can't bring them with you when you're born, and you can't take them with you when you die. Therefore, it advises us not to become obsessed with them. Instead, it encourages us to practice generosity and cultivate wisdom, to see through the illusion and break free from these golden chains. As the ancient saying goes, from simplicity comes clarity of purpose, from stillness comes foresight. The size of your bank account says nothing about the richness of your spirit. Only by cultivating character and purifying the mind can we live a life of deep and unshakable peace. Second, Buddhism inspires proactive, positive action. It is precisely by negating our attachments to the superficial things in life that Buddhism allows us to positively affirm the true value and meaning of our existence. Once we stop blindly chasing fleeting pleasures, we become free to dedicate ourselves to the service of others. When Buddhism says the body is empty and impermanent, it's not to make us devalue it. It's to encourage us to move beyond a me-first mentality and toward a life of all for one and one for all. If this I is not a solid, separate entity, then what is the ultimate purpose of hoarding fame and fortune for it? Buddhism teaches that all beings are part of one interconnected body, sharing in each other's joys and sorrows. The small self lives within the great self. Therefore, we must be willing to sacrifice our small, selfish interests for the good of the whole. This naturally leads to a spirit of compassion and a desire to help. Buddhism rejects the idea that our fate is in the hands of a god or some other external power. You are the creator of your own experience. Therefore, it is up to each of us to work hard, to persevere, and to build a better future. To create a better tomorrow, we must offer our best today. Without diligent cultivation, how can there ever be a bountiful harvest? The call to be content with little is not a call to shirk responsibility. On the contrary, Buddhism asks us to have shoulders of iron to carry the weight of the way. We cannot be self-liberators who care only for our own salvation. The great vows, however innumerable sentient beings are, I vow to save them. And if I do not enter hell, who will? Are the ultimate expressions of this proactive, world-engaging spirit. The ethical precepts of Buddhism are not dead restrictions. They are living encouragements. On the one hand, they help us prevent harm. On the other, they actively inspire us to save and serve others. Take the precept of not killing. Its true spirit isn't just about not killing yourself. It's about persuading others not to kill. For a bodhisattva, one dedicated to the path of awakening for all, to see someone in danger and fail to help is also a breach of this precept. The same goes for the other precepts. We not only refrain from stealing and lying ourselves, we must patiently and tirelessly encourage others to turn from harm and embrace virtue. If we live this way, the selfish mentality of everyone for themselves will dissolve. In its place will arise a society of public-spirited, warm-hearted people. As the classic text says, when the great way is practiced, the world is a commonwealth. This is a world filled with love and compassion, justice and truth. Third, Buddhism purifies society and the human heart. Open any newspaper, and what do you see? The headlines are a daily chronicle of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and deception. Who wouldn't sigh at the state of the world? A practicing Buddhist, at a minimum, commits to upholding the 5 precepts: to refrain from killing, to refrain from stealing, to refrain from sexual misconduct, to refrain from false speech, to refrain from intoxicants that cloud the mind. Think about it for a moment. Don't these 5 principles align perfectly with the core virtues prized by so many of the world's great ethical traditions? The compassion of not killing, the justice of not stealing, the respect of refraining from sexual misconduct, the wisdom of keeping a clear mind, free from intoxicants, the integrity of not lying. These 5 precepts are the foundation of a decent human life. A person who violates them cannot function well in society and will inevitably run afoul of the law. But Buddhism goes deeper, suggesting that to be truly human, one must uphold these precepts. To violate them is to risk being reborn in a state of great suffering. But we don't even need to talk about the next life. Just look at the present. If people did not kill, there would be no murder. If people did not steal, there would be no theft. If people did not engage in sexual misconduct, families would not be broken. If people did not lie, there would be no fraud or deception. If people did not abuse intoxicants, their minds would be clear, and they would not cause harm to themselves and others through foolish, clouded judgment. Would this not be a peaceful, stable, and happy society? This is what I mean when I say that Buddhism has the power to purify our world and our hearts. Fourth, Buddhism can bring you true and lasting happiness. What does a person need to be truly happy? It likely includes these things: a calm and peaceful mind, free from constant anxiety; the ability to face hardship with acceptance and resilience, without blaming the world; a rational and satisfying framework for understanding the great questions of life and the universe; a hopeful and reassuring perspective on the future and what happens after we die; the conviction that your destiny, your happiness, and your liberation is in your own hands, not controlled by anyone else. I believe that among all the world's religions and philosophies, none can satisfy all of these requirements as completely as Buddhism. Buddhism teaches contentment and the practice of meditation, leading to a calm and peaceful mind. It offers a change in perspective. An ordinary person is like a small child who cries inconsolably when they drop their candy. A Buddhist practitioner is like a mature adult who understands it's not worth getting upset over. The difference lies in one's view, one's wisdom, and one's level of inner development. Buddhism teaches that our present difficulties are the result of our own past actions. Therefore, we must face them with courage and take responsibility, rather than blaming heaven or earth. The vast library of Buddhist scriptures is not about displaying the power of a deity. It is a comprehensive and profound explanation of the fundamental questions of existence. It is this intellectual rigor that led the great British philosopher Bertrand Russell to say, "Of the religions of the world, I am most in favor of Buddhism." It is why great thinkers like Sun Yat-sen, Kang Yawei, and Liang Qichao all praised its depth, its philosophical sophistication, and its commitment to intelligent faith over blind belief. The scriptures say that a Buddha appears in the world for one great reason. What is that reason? It is to help all living beings turn from confusion to wisdom, to become free from suffering, and to enjoy a state of everlasting freedom and joy. Buddhism affirms the supreme dignity of the human being. There is no God in the heavens pulling our strings, controlling our fate. You are your own master. If you strive with effort and determination, a bright and brilliant future is assured. For all these reasons, I say with confidence that to walk the path of the Buddha is to find your way to true and lasting happiness. Fifth, you can see that the Buddha is humanity's kindest teacher. Siddhartha Gautama was born a prince. He turned his back on a life of power, fame, and wealth. Was he a fool? No, he was a person of immense compassion and profound wisdom. He embodied the spirit of worrying before the world worries. He saw that all human beings were trapped in the cycle of birth, old age, sickness, and death, and he could not rest. The finest food lost its taste. The most comfortable bed offered no peace. He left his palace to find a way out of this suffering for all of us. He also embodied the spirit of rejoicing after the world rejoices. For 49 years after his awakening, he wandered tirelessly, teaching day and night, leaving behind a priceless treasure of truth and guidance. He lit a lamp for humanity that can never be extinguished. He built a vessel of compassion that can never sink in the bitter sea of suffering. Who else has taken such a vow as his? If I do not enter hell, who will? A vow to not rest until every last being has been liberated. The Buddha never got angry with his students. He never punished them. You will find no stories in the Buddhist scriptures of the Buddha lashing out in fury, sending floods or plagues to punish humanity. He was always gentle, kind, and patient with his disciples. He truly taught without discrimination, to the old and the young, the rich and the poor, the noble and the humble. His teaching extended to every class of being in the universe. The Buddha was a master of skillful teaching. He knew how to adapt his message to the person and the moment, always offering the most helpful guidance for each individual's capacity. He taught that there were 4 ways to respond to a question. Some questions deserve a direct, categorical answer. Some questions must be answered with analysis. Some questions are best answered with a counter-question. And finally, some questions must be set aside. They should be left unanswered for the time being, because the questioner is not yet ready for the answer. To try and explain it would only create more confusion. It's like trying to explain calculus to a first grader who hasn't even learned arithmetic. This flexible, responsive approach to teaching is the very essence of skillful means. The Buddha always taught with love and patience. He did not believe that anyone was too foolish to be taught, or that anyone was too wicked to be redeemed. He dedicated his entire life, offering all of his wisdom and love, to explain the great truths of existence and to guide countless beings. Yet he never saw himself as a savior or a master. He saw himself simply as fulfilling his responsibility to continue the great lineage, to share the truths discovered by the infinite Buddhas of the past, and to inspire those who were ready to awaken. He himself was a Buddha, and he was certain that all beings in the universe, through their own effort and practice, could reach the very same state of wisdom and greatness that he had. Today, you are a student, learning and growing. You are on the path, but with effort, you too can master your field. You too can become a teacher, a guide, a person who contributes to the next generation. The Buddha and all beings are fundamentally equal. The relationship is not that of master and servant or master and slave. It is, for a time, the relationship of a teacher and a student. My dear young friends, when you are confused, you are an ordinary person. But the moment you awaken, you become a Buddha, a being of true wisdom and insight. Don't lose heart. Don't give up. Imagine a room that has been sealed in darkness for 10 years. The moment you light a single lamp, that decade of darkness vanishes, and the entire room is filled with light. As the Buddhist saying goes, in a room dark for 10,000 years, a single lamp can bring the light. Young friends, it is time to light the inextinguishable lamp within your own heart. The light is all around you. Happiness is right here at your side. These are the truths that the great, compassionate Buddha taught us. Is he not, then, humanity's kindest teacher? Sixth, Buddhism cultivates self-respect, self-confidence, and an independent character. The Buddha called himself a man of the way who depends on nothing. This is because from the first step of the path to the final fruit of enlightenment, no one can do the work for you. Everything depends on your own effort. Buddhism affirms that you are your own master, not someone else's servant. You don't need to rely on a god or even on the Buddha himself. Through your own efforts, you can become a Buddha. This is a teaching that inspires profound self-confidence and self-respect. According to many other religions, humans are created by God. No matter how hard we try, we cannot save ourselves. We must rely on a savior to grant us eternal life. He is the one and only truth and way. And even if we are saved, we can never be God's equal. He is the master and you are the servant. It is a relationship of eternal hierarchy. How disempowering is that? Buddhism, on the other hand, teaches that every single person has the innate potential for Buddhahood. It teaches, in all the heavens and earth, I alone am the honored one. No one has the right to control you or enslave you. Your successes and failures are in your own hands. The attainment of enlightenment, the perfection of your own character, this is a human achievement. It is not a gift of grace from a god, nor is it a rescue by a Buddha. It is your own self-salvation. Many other religions propose that we live for God. All of our achievements are to bring him glory. When things go well, it is to God's credit. When they go badly, it is our fault. Our intelligence and our abilities are gifts from him, so he deserves the credit for our success. Buddhism does not see it this way. It teaches that we live for ourselves and for all beings. We live to help create a world where everyone can be happy and free. Our achievements are the result of our own hard work. The glory belongs to humanity. If we fail, it is because our own effort was insufficient, and we must resolve to try even harder. This way of thinking liberates us from the shackles of a creator God. It frees us from the authority of a divine king. It reminds us that we must take responsibility for our own actions and not blame fate or others. If we are not created by a God, if we are not his servants, then we have the right to determine our own destiny. We have an independent character, not one that is owned or manipulated by a divine power. And only with a truly independent character can we speak of genuine self-respect and self-confidence. This is the Buddha's great declaration of liberty, equality, and fraternity for all humankind. It is a declaration that predates the French Revolution by over 2,400 years. It predates the humanism of the European Renaissance by nearly 2 millennia. My friends, think about this carefully. Do you want to be someone else's servant? Do you want to be a sheep herded by another? Or do you want to stand tall, a master of your own life, a sovereign of your own destiny? Chapter 6, a few final points. First, the imprint of Buddhism on culture. Of the world's great religions, Buddhism is the most ancient. As of this writing, Siddhartha Gautama was born over 2,500 years ago. Since its arrival in China during the Han Dynasty, Buddhism has, for millennia, been a primary spiritual path for the Chinese people. It was propagated by generations of brilliant monks and scholars, and embraced by emperors, ministers, and intellectuals. In time, it permeated every level of society. Its spirit became woven into the fabric of daily life, captured in the saying, "Every household calls on Amitabha, every family knows Guanyin." At the same time, its profound philosophy entered into a dynamic dialogue with Confucianism and Taoism. This interplay of ideas flowed into the great river of Chinese culture, becoming one of its most powerful currents and contributing to its most dazzling achievements. Culture is a vast and complex term, encompassing the entirety of human progress from barbarism to civilization. So, for now, let me focus on just one area: literature. I'd like to share the words of 2 great modern scholars, Liang Qichao and Hu Shi, on the immense contribution of Buddhism to Chinese literature. Liang Qichao identified 5 major impacts. Expansion of the language. The translation of Buddhist sutras introduced over 35,000 new words and concepts into the Chinese vocabulary. New literary structures. The analytical, highly organized commentaries on Buddhist texts introduced a new kind of systematic and structural writing to China. The recorded sayings of the Zen masters represented a true literary revolution. Development of new literary sensibilities. Our modern narrative literature, such as novels and ballads, is deeply indebted to the translation of Buddhist works. The emergence of long-form narrative poems was likely influenced by translated Indian epics like the Buddha-Charita, the life of the Buddha. Furthermore, the grand, expansive style of the Mahayana Sutras, used to articulate subtle philosophical truths, greatly expanded the Chinese imagination and introduced new modes of expression, which heavily influenced the great novels of the Song, Ming, and Qing dynasties. Introduction of music and drama. The earliest forms of musical theater in China can be traced back to traditions imported from India and Central Asia, along with Buddhism. Creation of a phonetic system. The introduction of Sanskrit, with its phonetic alphabet, inspired Chinese monks to create their own systems for transcribing sounds, leading to a more sophisticated understanding of phonology. Hu Shi highlighted 3 major contributions. The rise of vernacular literature. The great translators of the Buddhist canon chose to use a simple, plain, vernacular style. Their goal was clarity, not ornamentation. This created a powerful precedent for written vernacular Chinese, and monasteries became major wellsprings of vernacular literature and poetry. An infusion of imagination. Buddhist literature is fantastically imaginative. It acted as a liberating force on Chinese literature, which had traditionally been more restrained. The great romantic works of Chinese fiction, like the beloved novel Journey to the West, are direct products of this Indian literary influence. New and complex narrative forms. Indian literature paid great attention to structure and plot. The epic biographies of the Buddha, the novel-like sutras, and the dramatic, dialogue-driven texts like the Vimalakirti Sutra all provided new models for Chinese writers. They directly and indirectly contributed to the development of later Chinese storytelling, novels, and theater. The mixed prose and verse style common in the sutras also had a lasting impact on Chinese literary forms. I've shared all this just to make one point clear. Buddhism is not some fringe or foreign religion. It is deeply interwoven with the culture we inhabit. Its contributions, even in the single field of literature, are immense and undeniable. It is a tradition that deserves our attention, our respect, and our serious consideration. Second, a simple definition of Buddha. What is a Buddha? Buddha is an abbreviation of the Sanskrit word Buddha, just as LA is an abbreviation of the Spanish name, Los Angeles. What does Buddha mean? To define, Buddha is not easy. At its simplest, a Buddha is an awakened one. More precisely, a Buddha is a person who has a complete and thorough awakening to the fundamental nature of the universe and of life. Perhaps the most comprehensive definition is this: a Buddha is one who is self-awakened, who awakens others, and whose awakening and action are perfected. In other words, a Buddha is someone who has first awakened themselves, then helps others to awaken, and has brought this dual work to its most perfect and complete fulfillment. Who is the Buddha? We can answer this in two ways. In a narrow sense, the Buddha usually refers to Siddhartha Gautama, the historical figure born in India over 2,500 years ago. In a broad sense, Buddhism teaches that all living beings possess Buddha nature, the intrinsic potential to become a Buddha, just as iron ore has the potential to become steel. Therefore, Buddha is not a title exclusive to Siddhartha. It is a potential that exists within all of us. It's like the word teacher. It doesn't refer only to one great sage like Confucius or Socrates. It refers to anyone who can pass on knowledge and wisdom. Buddhism, then, is simply the path based on the teachings of the Buddha, the path of awakening. Buddhist philosophy, Buddhadharma, is the vast and profound body of teachings that illuminates that path. Third, Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist practice. Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist practice are two sides of the same coin. They are inseparable. A religious path without a deep philosophical core becomes a hollow ritual. A philosophy that is not put into practice becomes a sterile, intellectual game. Siddhartha Gautama used two powerful metaphors for this. He said that listening to teachings without practicing is like talking about food but never eating. It will never satisfy your hunger. He also said that true understanding is like drinking water, only you know if it's cool or warm. This points to the necessity of direct, personal experience. The Buddhist path is often described in 4 steps: faith, right arrow; understanding, right arrow; practice, right arrow; realization. Understanding is the study of the philosophy. Practice is putting it into action. They must go hand in hand. It is the union of knowing and doing. Without a sound theory, a path cannot win the confidence of intelligent people. Without practice, that theory can never have the power to heal the world or bring about personal transformation. The goal is to use practice to verify the theory, and to use theory to guide the practice. When we study the theory, we understand that suffering is endless, so we must resolve to end it. We see that countless beings are trapped in misery, and so we must resolve to help them, inspired by the great bodhisattvas who vow not to rest until all are free. We know that the goal of Buddhahood is the highest state of wisdom and compassion, so we must strive toward it with courage and determination. The theory shows us the destination, but we cannot admire the map and refuse to take the journey. If we do not begin to walk, we will never arrive. Fourth, how did the idea of God arise? It's a fascinating turn of events. The book of Genesis tells us that God created man, but modern psychology and the comparative study of religions suggest the opposite. Man created God. Why would we do this? In ancient times, without science, people did not understand the natural world. They were terrified by unpredictable disasters like floods, fires, and storms. They imagined that some unseen agent must be behind it all. They called this agent God. They saw lightning and imagined a thunder god. They saw a raging river and imagined a river god. These countless gods were born from human ignorance and fear. But as science progressed, it was like a great light being switched on. One by one, these gods were revealed to be phantoms and were discarded. Once we understood meteorology, the thunder god vanished. Once we learned civil engineering, the river god was no longer needed. The death of these gods represents the awakening of human reason. When we realized we could use our own intelligence to understand and work with nature, the idea of humanity conquering nature took root. We no longer needed to bow and scrape before these imaginary forces. So why today do some people still cling to the idea of an all-powerful creator? The reason is the same. There are still great mysteries we haven't solved. Where do we come from? Where do we go when we die? How did the universe begin? It is easier to invent a god who provides all the answers than to live with the profound uncertainty of these questions. But as we've discussed, this just pushes the question back. If God can be self-existent, why can't the universe? The concept of a personal creator God is a projection of the human mind, born from our inability to grasp the ultimate nature of reality. As our knowledge deepens, this concept too will likely be gently set aside, just as we set aside the gods of the rivers, trees, and stones. Chapter 7: How to be a Buddhist. After reading this book, perhaps some of you feel an affinity for this path and are wondering how to become a Buddhist. The answer is quite simple and can be broken down into 3 steps. First, understand the teachings. If something is worth doing, it's worth doing right. If you want to engage with a spiritual path, you must first understand its core teachings. Does it offer a coherent and satisfying explanation of life's great questions? The Buddhist path is one of intelligent faith, not blind belief. To be a Buddhist, you must first seek to understand. For example, once you understand that Buddhism is based on non-harming, you will see that practices involving animal sacrifice are contrary to its spirit. Once you understand that the goal is complete and perfect awakening, you will see why Buddhists revere Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as models to emulate, rather than praying to local deities or spirits who are themselves still caught in the cycle of suffering. We don't revere a name, we revere a state of being, the state of full awakening. Second, cultivate a great, compassionate vow. To be a Buddhist requires more than just good character and a sharp mind. It requires a vast and compassionate heart. Your personal liberation is tied to the liberation of all. The work of awakening oneself and awakening others becomes your life's mission. You understand, as the ancients said, that when another is hungry, I am hungry. When another is drowning, I am drowning. This compassion fuels your journey. This spirit is captured in the 4 great vows of a bodhisattva. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to end them all. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them all. The Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to attain it. Third, take refuge in the 3 jewels. Formally, becoming a Buddhist involves a ceremony called taking refuge. This means you accept the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, as your guides. The Buddha, the awakened one, our kindest and most brilliant teacher. We take refuge in him as our ultimate example. The Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, the lamp that illuminates the path to freedom. We take refuge in the teachings as our guide. The Sangha, the community of dedicated practitioners, especially the ordained monks and nuns who preserve and transmit the Dharma. We take refuge in them as our living teachers and companions on the path. Taking refuge can be a formal ceremony in a temple, similar to a baptism. It can also be a quiet, personal commitment you make in your own heart. The ceremony is not magic. Its purpose is to create a sense of community and to mark a conscious decision. It is a declaration to yourself. From this day forward, my old, unskillful life is over. My new life begins now. I will do my best to live by the teachings of the Buddha. This is the path of a Buddhist. Faith, right arrow, understanding, right arrow, practice, realization. You begin with an initial faith or trust in the path. This inspires you to understand the teachings through study and reflection. This understanding gives you the confidence to put them into practice in your daily life. And through diligent and consistent practice, you will eventually come to the direct, personal realization of the truths the Buddha taught, the supreme peace of nirvana, and the direct experience that you, too, have the potential to awaken completely.